Our theme this year is empowering connections. Empowering connections. The ability to communicate, to educate, to inform, and sometimes even to inspire. And yet, before we can do that, before we can accomplish a noble goal such as that, we have to empower ourselves first. We have to be whole in our heads and our hearts and our bodies as well. And yet, how can we do that if we are confronted with a disease, an illness, especially if that disease or illness is misunderstood by society or even disregarded as well? And I speak of anorexia, bulimia, the various eating disorders out there. Now, the studies show that when most people think of an eating disorder, they think of the young, rich little white girl, and she's recovered or she's recovering, and maybe she's written a book and she attends these fun walks, which I can guarantee you are not that fun. And everybody's happy and lives life. Well, if that's the case, you may be asking yourself by now, wondering, okay, so what is this old bald fat guy doing on stage trying to talk about this? Well, less than 6 months ago, I was asked, really required to speak at a fairly solemn event. And I go, and the crowd was about this size. And I'm looking in the eyes of people in the crowd, and I see such fear and tension. So I started my talk by saying, you have the perfect storm today. You've got a grieving dad, an attorney with a slight speech impediment, an open microphone, and a captive audience. You're going to be here a while. Well, there was some laughter just like that. The tension was cut a little bit. And that event, unfortunately, was the celebration of life funeral for my 23-year-old Morgan, who passed away after fighting an eating disorder for 8 years. And perhaps that's the first point. An eating disorder does not discriminate. It's one of the world's most perfect killers. It doesn't care about your age, or your race, or your national origin, or your socioeconomic background. It will take everyone. It will take you from the light, and it will pull you into darkness, and it leaves its victims to wonder why.
And I submit that what is empowering the eating disorder is society's misconceptions, that it's mainly limited to the rich little white girls. But as you'll see as I go on here, that's not the case. So, how pervasive is it in society today? Well, the statistics show that between 27 to 30 million people in the United States have or will suffer from an eating disorder in their lives. That's about 9%. So on a campus like UTD, there's about 16,000. There's about 16,000 undergraduate young adults here, which means there's about 2,100 students on this campus alone who have or will suffer from an eating disorder in their lives. If there are any professors here, I challenge you when you go into class on Monday, you might have a class of 30 or so. Pick out the 4 or 5 that could have an eating disorder, and I guarantee you, you won't be able to. So, with it being as prevalent as it is, you may be wondering, how severe is it? A person who is suffering from an eating disorder, this monster sinks its claws into them. As the disease progresses along, they can lose their hair, the enamel off their teeth. They can have heart arrhythmia. Liver, kidneys start to malfunction. The bone marrow stops producing blood. It's a slow death that lasts and takes years. Now, I could go into a bunch of statistics, even more about how severe it is, but there's only two I want you to think about. One, eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness out there today. More so than depression, more so than anxiety, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's. The death rate is higher to the extent. And if there's one fact I want you to take from this tonight, be it from me or perhaps I step on the other speaker's toes a little bit, from theirs as well, one fact. Once every 62 minutes, someone dies as a direct result of an eating disorder. Now, I've been here since about 4 o'clock this afternoon. That means in this time frame, 2 people have died. Once every 62. So, what's being done about it today? How is it being treated today? In general, it's being treated through talk therapy or counseling. And we have cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy and the Maudsley method, and we have counseling in general. And all that is great, but what does it do? How effective is it? And the best statistics show that talk therapy is effective about 60% of the time. You may be thinking, okay, 60% of the time. Well, that's 60% where there's not full recovery, but that means they can live their lives, maybe have kids, have a job, go to school, but the urges are still there. The urge, as the stress gets up, the need to purge is with them still. So with the 60% rate, we start to get the pharmaceutical companies involved, prescription drugs. And since other diseases and illnesses like post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety and depression and alcohol addiction, drug addiction seem to be intertwined as well, the doctors and counselors today are treating those with prescription drugs. Topamix and Paxil and Zyprexa and Wellbutrin, and the list goes on. And let's not forget my favorite, benzodiazepines, Ambien and Valium, Klonopin, which, unless watched very carefully, can end up killing just as surely as the disease. And you have a circumstance in which this is approximately a 1-year supply of drugs that were prescribed to my daughter before she passed away. You imagine, first, if you're sick, and then having to take that. What we're doing today does not work because we're addressing principally the symptoms, not, let's say, the biological cause. And to address the biological cause, we are talking about
the brain. Check out the big brain.
There's a crayon in my brain?
Yes, we're talking about the brain. Through years of research, it has been found that I think the phrase is, in all medical ability. Eating disorders originate in the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex of the brain. For those about halfway asleep or on their iPhones, that means it's right about there. And what we are doing today, research has shown that if you... I'm not that bad. If you have a magnet, again, the short version is you have a magnet over that part of the brain and it shoots pulses down into that part of the brain. It's supposed to help. The more involved explanation is that a doctor maps the brain, finds the core of the brain, finds that part of the brain. And the problem with eating disorders is that the brain atrophies. When it is so starved, the brain can atrophy. In addition, when a patient has had so many benzodiazepines, it also impacts the brain. It's difficult to find not only the core where the brain can be mapped, but the part of the brain that they want to focus on. If the person is not too far gone, then then the brain is mapped. They take a magnetic coil over that part of the brain and they shoot magnetic pulses rapidly for about 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week, for about 6 weeks, with the intent that it is supposed to stimulate that part of the brain to increase electrical activity. The belief is that as a person with an eating disorder starts to grow, that there is a developmentally dysfunctionality that exists in that part of the brain, and that part of the brain controls negative thought impulses, reward impulses, that sort of thing. By having the magnetic pulses go to that part of the brain, it stimulates electrical activity, and it is hoped that they can think more clearly, that we can keep them alive long enough where the brain can develop more and they have more of a chance to live. That is addressing the biological cause of this disease. It's not dependent on thousands of drugs. It's not dependent upon hours and months and years of counseling, but it's addressing perhaps the cause, which gives us hope. But of course, it is not foolproof. We need millions of dollars in research. There's a brilliant doctor I know at UT Southwestern here in town who's done some incredible work, but she has to drop down on her knees and beg for grants every year so she can continue her research. But as long as society still has this misconception of what this disease is about, how can we possibly hope to save those lives that happen that are taken from us once every 62? We need to raise awareness, knowledge of this disease as well, and you people are doing that just by being here. Talk about it. Discuss it. If you know someone affected, reach out to them. Be a candle of light, a candle of hope for them. Because if you don't spread the word, people will continue to be taken once every 62 minutes. Be that candle of hope for them. Be that candle of love. Spread the word. Thank you.